So I thought I'd make a quick video on Ethereum because Ethereum hasn't been performing very well in this particular phase of the cycle, especially when typically it moves up with Bitcoin. Typically, that's not really true, but it kind of is because everything kind of moves with Bitcoin in a way. And the reason why we haven't seen an all-time high, and the reason I believe we won't see an all-time high in this particular run, is because of the pattern. The pattern. Now, this is not Elliott Wave. I don't talk about Elliott Wave. I created my own wave methodology. It's called AriasWave, right? And it talks about it basically just means that when you're talking about Elliott Wave, this is typically what it looks like in a correction. A, B, C, right? Now, it could be like A, B, C, right? Elliott Wave tends to think that a zigzag is in between the A and the C portion of a move, like this move here. That's not true. According to AriasWave, every correction has 5 waves, right? Whether you can see it or not, it's just a flaw in your analysis. It's always there. These moves are always there, right? You always get this correction in a move, always, every time, without fail, right? Back here, we had an A, B, C, D, E move. Here, we have a very interesting pattern indeed. Sharp A. Yes, it is an A wave. You don't see it, but it's there, right? B, C, D, E. That's why it never made a new low. It was never a 5-wave move. Otherwise, you would have had a new low. You can't just have a 1, 2, 3. It's a zigzag, right? And then looking at this move here, it's just a 5-wave move, right? So that means that you're going to get this correction in reverse, right? So let me just highlight this. If it's a bear movement, you're going to get the correction in the opposite direction, right? So it's A, B, C, D, E, right? That E wave, we've got to watch out for it. It's a son of a bitch, right? Now, it's not always the case that these waves look exactly the same. It's just not. But there are clues along the way. So for here, we're looking at A, B, C. You see how that never made a new high above the previous high? It's a C wave. Here, we have a D wave. This is an E wave, very similar to what's happening in XLM and XRP, Litecoin, etc. Right? This is not going to make a new high. It's not going to make a new all-time high, right? It's probably going to come and retest the break of this particular channel that I've drawn, and that channel is important. Why? Because it's a 2-4 trend line channel, right? The wave 2 back in 2016, the wave 4 back in 2020, extrapolated, you can see what's happening. It fell out of that trend line. It's weak. It's a weak correction, right? Because corrections are not impulsive. That's why you've seen this wave go sideways and weak and never make a new all-time high, right? And if I'm wrong, well, you'd get a new all-time high. That would invalidate this, right? But if it doesn't happen, which I don't think it will, we're just simply going to see a C wave in brackets. That's all we're going to see, right? So that means you're going to get a C wave, and all that really means is that that's an A wave. And I thought that I'd make this video first because I need to now touch on Bitcoin. So in my next video, it'll be about Bitcoin, and I needed to sort of get this understanding out there to you, so then you sort of grasp at least this part here. So being an A wave, what does that mean? It means, well, look, this here can be a wave 1, this could be a wave 2, right? The same correction happens, this here happens in a zigzag and in a wave 2, and if you have a wave 4, it also happens in a wave 4, right? So that's the thing about this correction, is that it happens in any corrective portion, right, of any move, is that you're always going to see AriasWave. That's what I call AriasWave. That's why it's called AriasWave. Is that AriasWave means it's the correction, right? Because that's the most important thing in any move is the correction, right? It's all nice to say, oh yeah, 5-wave moves are great, right? But what's in the correction? Because that's always going to give you the clue as to what's happening, because almost everything is always part of a larger correction, right? It's fractal patterns. So you might look at it now and say, oh, that's impulsive. Yeah, but it's part of a larger correction, right? One that you can't see, especially not on this chart, right? And if you're thinking, well, there's not much data here, how can you say that? Well, because everything's correlated. It's correlated with the stock market, right? And the stock market's in a larger pattern, which I talk about in my other videos. So that's why I say that, because I've done the research. I've done like 8 years of back testing and research on this pattern, and it's always been there. It's always going to be there. It's just the way that it works, right? So therefore, if I ever get it wrong, it's because I didn't identify the waves correctly, because they're too choppy, they're too messy, this and that. There's a lot of back and forth here with these videos sometimes, right? But once I catch on to, what's happening due to more waves happening, use more evidence-based, analysis, back and forth, and then eventually I get to the conclusion of what I'm seeing, and my analysis becomes more clearer and more concisely and more correct. So I suppose what I'm trying to say here is that, okay, if Ethereum created a wave 1, that means we're in a bear market in Ethereum, right? And the reason why I say that I needed to show you this first is because what happens with B waves, right? B waves can expand to the upside, right? They can then create, right? Let me just get rid of this stuff here so I can just highlight what I think might happen. They can create, once again, this pattern, right? And then create a B wave that goes above the all-time high. It doesn't mean it's going to continue, right? Then you get a C wave down that could be pretty severe, right? Now, corrections usually retrace back to the previous 4th wave of the previous 3rd wave. Now, sometimes, depending on how long the previous 3rd wave is of the 3rd wave, wave 4 is basically here and here, right? So it could come back to this area, it could come back to this area. So it's always very similar in the levels. So back basically to support, right? So I'm not saying it's going to crash, 100%, but it's going to get pretty close, especially because we're dealing with crypto and the percentages are pretty crazy. So this is interesting for a couple of reasons, because you're going to have to wait until I post that next video on Bitcoin, which closely resembles Thorchain and Solana for the examples I'm going to use, and how this AB pattern is playing out right now in a different wave in those markets. So hopefully you found this one interesting and informative. Thanks for watching.